In this video, we are presenting a deep insight into the 8 schools of Tibetan Buddhism. The source of the information is Chamgon Kenting Tai Situpa. He is a lineage master of the Karma Kagyu tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. He says, Buddhism flourished in Tibet and many schools for the lineages have developed. It is like a trunk of a tree that has grown into many branches. There are 8 major branches in Tibetan Buddhism. Everybody likes to say there are 4 schools in Tibetan Buddhism, Nyingma, Sakya, Kagyu and Gelugpa. But that is a very simplistic and lazy description. There are not 4 but 8 schools, 8 major lineages. Nyingma, Kadampa, Sakya, Marpa, Shangpa, Zhijed, Jordrug and Dorje Nyendrub. Nyingma lineage. The first one is known as Nyingma. Until Atisha Dipankara, who was from Bangladesh, until he came, all of Tibetan Buddhism is Nyingma. Nyingma means old. For example, an old bag can be called Nyingpa. So Nyingma is the oldest school of Tibetan Buddhism, starting from Guru Rinpoche. Before Guru Rinpoche, there were many generations. There was Dharma. But from when Guru Rinpoche came to Tibet until Atisha Dipankara came to Tibet, it is known as Nyingma. During the time of Guru Rinpoche, it was known as Nyingma Kama. Kama means command. So Guru Rinpoche's teaching is known as Nyingma Kama. But after Guru Rinpoche left Tibet, all the teachings that derived after that are known as Nyingma Therma, so Kama and Therma. Guru Rinpoche and his disciples put certain texts into hiding for later rediscovery, and they prophesied who was going to find what and when. According to those prophecies, the texts were found, and the lineage of transmission was received from Guru Rinpoche by those people. Guru Rinpoche is immortal, so you can receive transmission from him today, if you are prophesied and an enlightened person. So these people received direct transmissions from Guru Rinpoche and discovered hidden treasures, thermas. So Nyingma Therma means this, it means treasure. Then the Dharma is, Dharmakaya is Kuntu Zangpoe and Sambhogakaya is Vajrasattva. From these 2, Guru Rinpoche received transmissions. From Guru Rinpoche to all his disciples, such as Garab Dorje and others, there are 25 enlightened masters. All these are the Nyingma lineage. There are many things, but if you really look into it, it is summarized into 2 things. First is Dzogchen, which is the final and most profound teaching of Nyingma. It is about the nature of mind and the methods to realize the nature of mind. Dzogchen has many levels of practice. The second thing is there are 8 aspects of deity practice: body, speech, mind, knowledge, activity, wrathful, offering and peaceful. The body is Manjushri-oriented, speech is lotus-oriented, mind is Yandak-oriented, knowledge is Amrita-oriented, and activity is Vajrakilaya-oriented, etc. These are 8 aspects of the deity of the Nyingma lineage. Dzogchen and that somehow cover most of the Nyingma practice. But of course, each of them have so many elaborated sub-practices. Then there are 6 main seats for the Nyingmapas. In Upper Tibet, there are the 2 monasteries of Dorjeyendrub and Mindroling. In Middle Tibet, there are the 2 main monasteries of Shechen and Dzogchen. Then in Lower Tibet, the 2 main monasteries are Katok and Palyul. The head of Dorjeyendrub is Jordrug Rinchen Chenpo. The head of Mindroling is Mindroling Trichen Rinpoche. The head of Shechen is Shechen Rabjam. The head of Dzogchen is Dzogchen Pema Rinchen. The head of Katok is Katok Shejong. And the head of Palyul is Palyul Urgyen. So these are the 6 main masters of the Nyingma lineage. But out of all of them, the supreme head of all of the Nyingma is His Holiness Minling Trichen Rinpoche, 1931 to 2008, the hereditary successor of Minling Terchen and head of Mindroling Monastery. This post as hereditary is from father to son. He must marry and he must have a son, and that son becomes the head of the Nyingma lineage. So that is the Nyingmapa, one of the oldest lineages, Kadampa lineage. The second of the 8 lineages is the Kadampa. Ka is command. Dam means instruction. All the commands of the Buddha are instructions for the liberation of sentient beings. That is what Kadam means. During the time of Mune Tsenpo, a son of Trisong Detsen, the Tibetan king who invited Guru Rinpoche to Tibet, he made a very special policy for Tibet, that there were to be no rich and no poor people. Everybody was equal. That was his mission. He did not want any rich or poor people. Everybody was to be equal. After Mune Tsenpo, the throne was later passed to his brother Sadnaleg. He had a problem with his neck, so he had a nickname, Jingun, crooked neck. His other name was Chite Chenpo. When he became king during his time, he built a very important temple called Jongjung Gyalte. His son was Jeralpakan, 806-841 AD, who was a very devout king. When he invited monks to his palace, he used to undo his hair and put it on the ground and make all the monks walk on his hair. He respected ordained Sangha that much. He was also supposed to be an emanation of Vajrapani and prophesied in the White Lotus Sutra. During that time, 5 Indian abbots, Acharya Jinamitra, Surandra Bodhi, Sri Dalanda Bodhi, Danashila and Bodhimitra, and the Tibetan abbots, Rinchen Sangwa and Chosum Sultrim, Skanin, Dharmashila, along with 4 Tibetan translators, Janasingha, Jinanarangshita, Manjushivarma and Ratnashila. These main people under the patronage of King Ralpakan, who made his hair as a doormat for Sangha to walk on, they translated most of the texts from Sanskrit into Tibetan. The old translations, which were not very clear, they retranslated and made them clearer. And the translations which were word-for-word translations and not clear, they made meaning translations of them. For example, in English, when you say, "How are you?" that doesn't make any sense in Tibetan. It has to be translated into the Tibetan equivalent of "How are you?" rather than translating it exactly as "How are you?" In previous translations, many texts were left as word-for-word translations. So when they were changed into meaning translations, what it meant in Sanskrit, the same meaning, was conveyed into the Tibetan language. Also at that time, many of the texts that were very difficult to understand were made understandable. At this time, there were many problems between the neighboring countries. There were fights and disputes, but they were settled and many treaties were written. Many of the treaties were written on stone pillars. The original Greater Tibetan border is actually carved everywhere on stone. Orders were carved on stone, but I'm sure if the modern governments find them, they will remove them. It's very easy. From north to south, all the Tibetan borders were marked with stone carvings. Stone pillars and disputes were settled. Also, many religious places were established. Unfortunately, one of the ministers killed King Ralpakan. Then his son, the crown prince, was expelled to the Tsang area. From the main capital to Tsang, it is not very far, but they expelled him to there. At that time, there was a very important minister called Pelgi Yönten. He slandered about the queen and lamas being involved, so the lamas were killed and the queen killed herself. These things happened when King Ralpakan was very young. Actually, when his minister killed him, he was only 35 years old. Actually, they held him and twisted his head. It is said that his face was twisted backwards. They killed him that way. Because the crown prince was expelled then, the king's older brother, known as Lang Dharma, who was supposed to have had a horn growing on his head, became the king. Lang Dharma was very bad and a total non-believer. He destroyed most of the monasteries and made monks and nuns disrobe. Quite a few very important masters escaped to eastern Tibet to come, and the king lost that part of Tibet. They resisted against him. They did not want to destroy the temples and go against the Dharma. In central Tibet, Lang Dharma, as the king, wanted to destroy everything. East Tibet was fighting with central Tibet, and these masters escaped to East Tibet with lots of Dharma texts. King Lang Dharma threw the Buddha statue into a cellar and also dumped many of the Buddhist texts there. Nobody was allowed to read the texts, and he also burned many of them. At that time, there was a great master who was born in Lalung. His name was Lalung Palgi Dorje. The king was reading stone carvings on a pillar in Lhasa. He had made some alteration and was reading it. Lalung Palgi Dorje wanted to kill him, because otherwise he would go on destroying everything. So Lalung Palgi Dorje, as he was prophesied and told from higher sources, created a big hat, which is called a black hat nowadays in Lama dances. Also, he made a garment with very long sleeves, because one sleeve was to hide an arrow and the other sleeve to hide a bow. So a bow and arrow were hidden in the sleeves, and he painted his horse totally black, and then he was dancing. The king was enjoying his dance while he was reading the stone carving in the pillar, and then, in the middle of all of that, he shot the king in the head and killed him. Lalung Palgi Dorje then jumped on his horse and rode through the river Tsangpo, which washed all the black color from his horse, so his horse became white. So he managed to escape on a white horse because everyone was looking for a guy on a black horse. Lalungpalgi Dorje was a great hero, even though he had to kill a person. Langdharma had a son called Osung, protected by light. Because his father was so paranoid, he wanted to protect his son 24 hours a day. So the whole night he wanted light to be in the room of his son with armed guards to protect him in the light. Buddhism was revived again in the 10th century under King Kore of Ngari. He developed an interest to re-establish the Dharma in Tibet. He sent quite a few people to India to invite enlightened masters, but they didn't really manage to find any. Many of the people he sent died, and those that came back empty-handed. Finally, one person, Nyendrub Senge, met with Atisha Dipamkara. After so many problems trying to find the right guru, finally one of the people he sent managed to find Atisha Dipamkara. But Atisha Dipamkara did not accept the invitation to come to Tibet. Then Lama Yeshe, who had given the throne to his younger brother and became a monk, went to different parts of Tibet to find gold and take this gold to India to invite great masters, such as Atisha Dipamkara. He went to the Tibetan borders, and on one of the borders, which was known as Karlok, somewhere on the southwestern side of Tibet, one of the tribes there captured him. They found out he was a Tibetan prince who had come to collect gold in order to go to India to invite great masters. When they found that out, they did not kill him but wrapped him in cloth and kept him like money. Then his brother's son, Jangchub found out about this and returned with 100 horsemen to save him. The Karlok's king told them to give the weight of the person in gold in exchange. They gave all the gold they had, but the weight of the head was lacking. Therefore, they did not let him go and killed him. So Lama Yeshe died searching for the Dharma. But before that, he told his cousin, who was sent for him, "Don't do anything for me. There is nothing to do for me. Take all this gold and invite Atisha Dipamkara to Tibet. You don't have to save me. Take this gold and invite Atisha Dipamkara and let them kill me. It's okay." Then the Karloks killed him. He died by being thrown into a pit filled with insects. The Karloks threw him there and the insects ate him alive, which was their way of killing people. Before this happened, he sent a message to Atisha Dipamkara. He said, "In my future life, may I become your disciple." I died for it. When the Tibetans went to see Atisha Dipamkara with the gold, they told him the whole story. "For inviting you, our prince went to search for gold, and then these things happened, and he died for it. Now please come to Tibet." Then Atisha Dipamkara accepted and came to Tibet. He taught the view according to Madhyamaka, the action according to Vinaya, and the instructions according to the Bodhisattva's way. These teachings are known as Kadampa. Atisha had three main disciples, Ku, Ngog and Drom. Ku was the incarnation of Manjushri, Ngog the incarnation of Vajrapani, and Drom the incarnation of Avalokiteshvara. Drom had three main disciples, Putowa Rinchen Sal, Chengawa Tsultrimbar, and Fuchungwa Shionu Gyaltsen. These six great masters were responsible for continuing the Kadam lineage, which was transmitted to Tibet by Atisha Dipamkara as the result of all this. The prince who gave up his life, the one who went to save him but did not manage to come back, and the king who then sent other messengers to bring Atisha to Tibet. After these great masters, then Tsongkhapa, an incarnation of Manjushri, was born. When he was 53 years old, he built Ganden monastery, the main seat of the Gelugpa. Gelugpa by definition is the tradition of Geden. Ge means Geden monastery. Luk means tradition, lineage. So the lineage of Geden monastery built by Tsongkhapa, Dharma Rinchen, and Gelek Pelsang. In Gelugpa monasteries, three masters sit there. The middle one is Tsongkhapa, the right one is Dharma Rinchen, and the left one is Gelek Pelsang. There is also Manjushri Zangpa 7 lineage, Gyaltsab Je, Kedrub Je, Shalu Kepa Gyaltsen, Lodro Gyaltsen, Shogi Gyaltsen, Shanpa Loden, Nyendrub Manang Pal. These are known as great lineage holders of the Gelugpa lineage, known as Manjushri Zangpa 7 masters. One of the direct disciples of Tsongkhapa, Jamyang Tashi Pelden, built Drepung monastery 8 years after the construction of Ganden monastery. Then another disciple and great master, Jamchen Choje Sakya Yeshe, built Sera monastery 11 years after the building of the previous monastery. Then the incarnation of Dromtonpa Gyalwe Jungne, one of the six mentioned earlier and born before Tsongkhapa. So Gendun Trup built Tashi Lunpo 29 years after the construction of Ganden monastery. all the Dalai Lamas are incarnations of Gendun Trup. Gendun Gelek Pelsang's incarnation Sunam Tobye Langpo. His incarnations are known as the Panchen Lamas. They head the Tashi Lunpo monastery. Then there are three other very great masters known as three incarnate masters of the Gelug lineage. So from there up until now it continued and spread to many places. The original birthplace of Tsongkhapa was in Amdo. There they built Phumpo monastery, a very special monastery. When a baby is born, there is the placenta, which attaches the baby to the mother. When Tsongkhapa was born and this was cut and thrown away, where it was thrown a tree grew. This tree is there in Amdo Phumpo monastery, and each one of the leaves of that tree has a Sanskrit or Tibetan character, Om, Ah, Hung, etc. The tree is still there, and the characters are naturally visible to anyone. That is roughly about the Gelugpa lineage. Up until Tsongkhapa we call it Kadampa. And after Tsongkhapa built Ganden Monastery at the age of 53, then the Gelugpa started. But before that it was Kadampa. And until that Tsongkhapa was a follower of Kadampa. Lamdre Sakyapa lineage. The Sakyapa lineage was originally known as the Lamdre lineage. Lam means path, Dre means result. This starts with the descendant from heaven. The father's side we call bone and the mother's side we call blood. A particular bone descendant from heaven was known as Khunbone. He had two brothers, one was Dorje and one was Rinchen. These two received direct transmission from Guru Padmasambhava in a very special way. From there until Kun Sherab Sultrim there were 10 generations. From father to son, 10 generations went by. So during that time the Kuns practiced Nyingma teachings because they received transmissions from Guru Rinpoche. All the generations had practiced the Nyingma lineage. But Kun Sherab Sultrim, the 10th generation, his younger brother Kunchok Gyalpo, became a disciple of Drogmi Lotsawa Shakya Yeshe. He became a great master of the later translations of Nyingma, instead of the earlier translations. When he was 40 years old, he built the Tsang Sakya monastery in the Tsang area. Sa means land and Kya means grey, so the land is barren. There are no trees or grass. The land is like Ladakh. The name Sakya started because of the visual description of the land on which Kunchok Chok Gyalpo, the first Sakya Trizin, built the monastery. This was also prophesied by Atisha Dipamkara, who said that there will be 7 incarnations of Manjushri and 1 incarnation of Vajrapani born on this grey land area. The prophecy was thus fulfilled when this happened. Drogmi Lotsawa Shakya Yeshe was the master of Vinaya, Prajna Paramita and some of the Tantras, which he received from great masters such as Shantipa and Viravajra. He received tantric teachings, Lamkorgu we call it, the Sakyapa's main practice of Tantra. 9 main paths. The first one is Lamdre. Then in the second one, the main Tantra is the Hevajra Tantra. But there is visualization which has 9 stages and completion which has 1 stage, like subtle energy. The third is also based on Tantra, but it is about the practice of bodhicitta. The fourth one is the same Hevajra Tantra, but is about spontaneously arising visualization practice. The fifth is about Mudra Yoga, which is based on one Tantra called Yeshe Tigle. The sixth one is the Tantra of Great Union. The seventh is the practice of Chakra Samvara. This has all aspects of outer, inner and secret practices. The eighth is based on Gaiha Samaja, which originally does not have any written instructions. It is from master to disciple, from mouth to ear lineage. I don't know how it is these days, but originally it was never written down. It is about Gaiha Samaja Mahamudra. The ninth one is about Mother Tantra, the essence of Mother Tantra. This is known as one that straightens which is not straight. It is about Nadis and Bindus, to make straight that which is not straight, opening of the chakras, etc. The great Indian Mahasiddha, from whom the Tibetan Lotsavas received these teachings, came to Tibet 3 times, and the Sakyapa master Drogmi Lotsawa received it. There is a simple way to describe these 9 teachings. The first one is a simple way described as early Lamdre, and all the other 8 are later Lamdre. But it is actually the same thing. It is like preliminary Lamdre and the actual Lamdre, or the preliminary Lamdre and later Lamdre. Lamdre means path and result. One of the main masters of the Sakya lineage was Kunchok Gyalpo's son, Sachen Kunga Ningpo, an incarnation of Vajrapani, who received transmissions from Bari Lotsawa, his main guru. He encountered Lord Manjushri in person and received direct transmissions from him. Also, he attained high realization through receiving transmission from the great Indian master Virupa, and himself became a great master. Of the 5 main figures of the Sakyapa lineage, 3 were not bhikkhus and 2 were. Sachin Kunga Ningpo had 4 sons: Kungabar, Sonam Tsemo, Jetsun Dakpa Gyaltsen and Palchen Wopa, the father of Sakya Pandita. Sonam Tsemo, Jetsun Dakpa Gyaltsen and Palchen Wopa remained as tantric practitioners, tantric yogis. They were not monks. Of course, monks can also be tantric yogis. Anyway, Sachin Kunga Ningpo and 2 of his sons, Sonam Tsemo and Jetsun Dakpa Gyaltsen, are known as the 3 white ones. Then the 2 red ones, Sakya Pandita Kunga Gyaltsen and Drogon Chogyal Phagpa, the nephew of Sakya Pandita, means the 2 who became bhikkhus, monks. All 5 of them make the 5 main figures of the Sakya lineage. The descendants of the Kun throne are the heads of the Sakya. Right now, His Holiness Sakya Trizin is the descendant of the Kun, that is the Sakya lineage, briefly. There is a lot more, but time is flying and I don't want to go into history tomorrow. I want to finish this history today. The Sakyapa actually has a few more branches: Sakya, Ngorpa and Sarpa. The head of the Sakya is Sakya Trizin. Ngorchen Kunga Zangpo founded the Ngor school and established Ngor Iwa monastery, which was continued by the great master Muchen Sempa. This monastery has 4 main abbots known as Tartse, Luding, Khangsar and Fende. So this is known as Ngorpa. The Sar school was founded by Tsachen Losel Gyatso. His 2 foremost disciples were Khyentse Wangchug and Lundrup Gyatso. So the Sakya has 3 main lineages. Just like the Nyingma have 6 main monasteries and the Gelugpa have 3 main monasteries: Sera, Drepung and Ganden. This way I think Sakya is roughly covered. Kagyu lineage, Ka means command. Gyu means lineage, the lineage of the command of the Buddha. There are 2 lineages which hold the name Kagyu. One is the Shangpa Kagyu and the other is Marpa Kagyu. When we say 8 lineages of Tibetan Buddhism, it is Nyingma, Kadam, Lamdre, Marpa Kagyu, Shangpa Kagyu, Zhijed, Jordrug and Dorje Nyendrub. Now I will talk about Marpa Kagyu. The great master Tilopa was a very important Mahapandita, and he finally achieved all the realizations as a Mahapandita. Then he went into the stage of tantric transformation. In tantric practice, he received 4 main transmissions of lineage from Saryapa, Nagarjuna Luvabapa, Sukasiddhi, Indrabhuti and Matangi, who were his main masters. All the transmissions that he received from them are the 4 streams of transmission. We call it Kagi Jupa. This involves illusory body, clear light, Guru Yoga, Bardo, intermediate state, transferring of consciousness, Tumo, practice of the Bindu, heat, wisdom practice, the tantric transformation of negative samsaric duality into positive enlightenment, non-duality. Then Drongjug, which is another form of Fawa, which is to transfer consciousness from one state to another. Tilopa received all of these teachings and practiced 12 years in a very small place. He chained himself there so that he would not do anything else but practice. He was chained for 12 years and practiced all these sacred transmissions that he had received. Finally, he attained realization and then received transmission directly from Buddha Vajradhara. There is a very long story. I wrote a whole book on this, which is about how he went through all the stages and finally attained realization. These transmissions he transmitted to many disciples. But one of his main disciples was Naropa. Naropa, after many hardships, finally received the transmission, and then he practiced and attained enlightenment equal to that of Tilopa. For example, Tilopa was practicing while as a servant for a lady who was selling wine and also involved in prostitution. She was a Dakini, but externally she was involved in this. Tilopa was pounding sesame seeds to make oil for her. In the evening, she sent her customers to him to take home and to bring new customers to her. He was doing all this as his practice, and finally one day he attained realization. The next morning, Tilopa was in the sky at a height 7 times that of a tree, known as Tala in India, a date palm. He was singing songs to all the city. He was the servant of this woman, and the whole city attained realization. They all got enlightened because of his teaching from a height 7 times that of a Tala. It is said that if the head of a Tala is cut, it will never grow. Many Tibetans mistake a Tala for a banana tree, but banana trees they always cut and they still grow. So it is not that, it is a date palm. Naropa followed Tilopa and went through 12 main tests and hardships before Tilopa finally decided to teach him, and he then attained enlightenment. Then the Tibetan master Marpa Lotsawa went to India 3 times and spent 21 years in India, out of which exactly 16 years and 7 months he spent with Naropa and Maitripa, who were his main gurus. He had 108 gurus, but his main gurus were Naropa and Maitripa. He spent time with them and received transmissions of 14 main tantras, now known as the 14 main tantras of the Marpa lineage, such as Hevajra, Guya Samaja, Vajravarahi, Yamantaka, Mahamaya, Chakrasamvara, etc. These tantras were received by Marpa, who practiced them and finally brought them back to Tibet. Marpa's main disciple was Milarepa. Milarepa wanted to see Marpa, so he went all the way to Marpa's village. When he got to the village, there was a middle-aged man, a big man, plowing the ground with oxen. Milarepa asked him, "Do you know Marpa?" He said, "Yes." "Do you want to see him?" Milarepa said, "Yes." So the man told him, "Wait here." He had a container of wine and said, "Drink this and I will go and call Marpa." So Milarepa sat there and drank the wine. He finished it and was still sitting there, but no Marpa showed up. Finally, Marpa's wife came and took Milarepa in, and the person who he had met on the hill, who was actually Marpa, was sitting on the throne. That is how Milarepa met Marpa for the first time. Then Marpa gave him a very hard time. He purified all his bad karma, demolished his ego, and finally transmitted to him the lineage he had received from Naropa, Maitripa, etc. Another disciple of Marpa was Ngokton Choje Dorje. Most of Marpa's transmissions about practice were transmitted to Milarepa, and most about the intellectual teachings were transmitted to Ngokpa. So Shepa and Drupa, 2 lineages, were transmitted to these 2 disciples. Of course, Marpa had many other disciples also. Milarepa's main disciple was Gampopa, who was a monk. How he became a monk is interesting. He was a young and very handsome layperson with a very beautiful wife, but she got sick and was dying. She was in agony for days and months, and she said to Gampopa, "I don't want you to marry anybody else." Finally, he promised her that he would not marry again. Then she died, and Gampopa got ordained and became a monk. He went to Milarepa, and the first thing Milarepa did was he had a kapala, skull cup, with alcohol, and he told Gampopa to drink it in front of all the people. Gampopa was a monk, and now he had to drink a kapala full of wine, so he felt a little bit strange. Then he thought, "It is my guru's word." So he drank it, and not even a drop was left. Milarepa then decided, "This disciple can receive all the transmissions that I have." It was a very auspicious sign that Gampopa was a worthy disciple for Milarepa. So Milarepa transmitted all his transmissions to Gampopa. Then finally, Milarepa prophesied that Gampopa should build a temple in a certain place and describe the shape of the mountain and all of that. Milarepa had many disciples, such as Richangpa, many men and women disciples. But the most enlightened disciples of Milarepa were 3 men and 4 women and 8 Ripas. 2 of the main disciples whom Milarepa described as the sun and moon were Gampopa and Richang Dorje Richangpa. Gampopa was like the sun because his lineage was involved with great propagation, and he was also an ordained bhikshu. Richangpa was like the moon because his lineage was very precious and profound, but not that glorious like Gampopa's. It went from mouth to ear. That way it did not spread like Gampopa's lineage. So they were the 2 main disciples of Milarepa. Gampopa had 4 main disciples from whom came what is known as the 4 greater Kagyu lineages, one of which is the Karma Kagyu. Starting with the first Karmapa, who was born in the Tesho part of Kham in East Tibet, which was a small kingdom right next to the kingdom of Dorje. He was born there and became a disciple of Gampopa. He received all the transmissions, and as it was prophesied, he established Tsurfu monastery. First, there were small buildings in groups of 5 which still stand, and later it became the seat of the Karmapas. All the followers of that lineage are known as Karma Kagyu. The other 3 greater lineages are the Phagmo Kagyu from Phagmo Drupa, Barom Kagyu from Barom Dharma Wangchuk, and from Jangsalpa Tsondu Dakpa, a student of one of Gampopa's main disciples, Ongom Tsultrim Nyingpo, the Salpa Kagyu. These 4 lineages are known as the Greater Kagyu because they are from the direct disciples of Gampopa. Out of the 4 main disciples, Phagmo Drupa had 8 main disciples. from which came those known as the 8 lesser Kagyus. Not because they are lesser, because they are the disciples of the disciple of Gampopa. So from Phagmo Drupa came the Drikung Kagyu, Lingre Kagyu, Taklung Kagyu, Yasang Kagyu, Trofu Kagyu, Shuksep Kagyu, Yelpa Kagyu, and Martsang Kagyu schools. The Lingre Kagyu is now known as the Drukpa Kagyu. Originally it was Lingre Kagyu, but now it is called Drukpa Kagyu. These are the 8 sub-lineages of the Kagyupa, and under the Karma Kagyu there are Surmang Kagyu, Nyendo Kagyu, and Gyaltun Kagyu. 3 sub-lineages which have developed further. All these lineages that developed like a tree into branches, they are not something that got split because people did not get along. It was according to the prophecy of the Master. The disciples spread the lineage and it has its own identity. Then there were 3 main seats for the Karma Kagyu. But over the years, these 3 main seats were all interrupted because of Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan, and all those episodes. Then the Karma Kagyu lineage had 2 seats, Churfu and Palpung. Churfu is like Ganden monastery for the Gelugpa, where the regent of Tsongkhapa is the Ganden Tripa. The head of the Gelugpa is the Ganden Tripa, not the Dalai Lama. Many people have this strange misconception that His Holiness Dalai Lama is the head of the Gelugpa, which is not true. His Holiness Dalai Lama is the temporal and spiritual head of Tibet and all of Greater Tibet. But the head of the Gelugpa is the Ganden Tripa, which is by graduation, not incarnation. He starts as an ordinary monk and goes all the way. He goes through all the stages and finally becomes the Ganden Tripa. The present Ganden Tripa is the 101st or 102nd Ganden Tripa, so it is by graduation. The Karmapa is the head of the Karma Kagyu. Actually, the Karmapa in Tibet is respected by all the schools as well as the head of all of the Kagyu. Because out of the 4 schools, Nyingma, Sakya, Gelugpa, which we have right now, the Karmapa is the only one who is by incarnation. The Nyingma and Sakya are by heritage and Gelug is by graduation. But Kagyu is by incarnation. The Karmapa leaves a written instruction and according to that, the next Karmapa is found. Although in Tibetan Buddhism we believe everybody dies and is born life after life, the master dies and reincarnates and has the same name and continues the activity started from the first Karmapa. Until the first Karmapa prophesied his incarnation and the second Karmapa was found, there was no such thing as a reincarnate Lama. But later, the reincarnated masters traced back their sources. For example, Taisitupa, the first Taisitu title started in 1407, but the previous incarnations in Tibet trace back until Lord Marpa. From there it traces back to India as Dombi Heruka, one of the 84 Mahasiddhas, then from there to Guru Padmasambhava and to Lord Maitreya, etc. Many of the reincarnations in Tibet count all of that. So they say they are the 26th incarnation, the 30th incarnation, the 40th incarnation. But actually, truly, the counting should be from when the first incarnation is recognized as an incarnation of somebody, is enthroned and takes the seat of the predecessor. It should start from there. That way, I myself am the 12th Taisitu. Otherwise, I can call myself the 50th Taisitu. But that's not correct. Anyway, the Karma Kagyu has 2 main seats. Tsurfu, the Karmapa's seat, like Ganden Monastery, and Palpung, which is like Sera, Dripung, and all the others. Palpung is my seat. In Tibet, Palpung Monastery had 13 monastic estates and 180 monastic branches all over Greater Tibet. That's what I am. And all the things that I have been doing since I was 18 months old until now is to try to catch up and uphold all the things that the previous Taisitus have done. Whether somebody understands it or not, misunderstands it or not, likes it or not, agrees with it or not, there is nothing I can do. If they don't like me doing my job, then they'd better shoot me. Really, there is no other way to stop it. So that is the Karma Kagyu lineage, Shangpa Kagyu lineage. During the time of Marpa, there was another master known as Kyungpo Naljor from a place in Tibet called Shangshung. In the beginning, he was a Bonpo, not a Buddhist, but a Buddhist type of Bonpo, which we have in Simla, that type of Bonpo. It is very much Buddhist. Then he became Nyingma. But finally he went to India and he met with the sister of Naropa, Niguma, a great enlightened Mahasiddha. Then he met another great enlightened lady master called Sukhasiddhi. From these 2 enlightened Mahasiddha women, another 13 great masters, 4 root masters and 150 enlightened and learned masters, he received transmissions. Mainly he received 5 tantric transmissions. Marpa received 14. The 5 Kungpo Naljo received were Hevajra, Chakrasamvara, Goyhasamaja, Mahamaya and Yamataka. These 5 are the main tantras, and all the practices are similar to the Marpa Kagyu, which are the 6 yogas, but all are based on these 5 tantras. Kedrup Kungpo Naljor brought these from India to Tibet and established his seat in the Shang area, called Shangshung, and therefore his lineage became known as the Shangpa Kagyu. He lived until a very old age, 150 years old. In the history of Tibetan Buddhism, he is one of the masters who lived the oldest. This lineage is very rich actually. It has so many great masters and many branches, it really flourished. But a few hundred years ago, everything fell apart, and the Shangpa Kagyu was almost finished. But then at that time, the 9th Taisitu discovered a young boy who was serving as a secretary to one of the head ministers of the king of Dorje. He told this minister, "I want to bring your secretary up. He's a great person. He's not just a young boy." So he took him and gave him transmissions and named him Chamgon Kenting Tai Situpa. Chamgon Kenting Tai Situpa became one of the most important Renaissance masters of Tibetan Buddhism. His seat was Palpung Monastery, my monastery, which has Chamgon Kenting, Chamgon Kenting Tai Situpa, and a few of the Untruls as the main Rinpoches. Then later quite a few other Rinpoches also resided at Palpung Monastery, such as Thutop Tulku, Gungri Tulku, etc. Originally Tai Situpa, then later Chamgon Kenting, Chamgon Kenting Tai Situpa and others also resided there. During the time of Chamgon Kenting Tai Situpa, he revived the Shangpa Kagyu lineage. Otherwise it would have been gone. In Palpung Monastery there were 3 main retreats. The upper retreat, which was the residence of Chamgon Kenting Tai Situpa, that is the Shangpa Kagyu retreat. The middle retreat, which was my summer home. In summer I stayed there, that is the Marpa Kagyu lineage, the 6 yogas of Naropa, etc. Then the lower retreat, which was Jamyang Khyentse Wangpos. They practiced many other practices there and also did short retreats, like 1 year and 6-month retreats, etc. The main administration of the Palpung Labrang was established by the 8th Taisitu. Up until the time of the 8th Taisitu, the seat of the Taisitus was in Karmagun, which is very close to Chamdo in central Tibet. When the 8th Situ was born, around that time, Gyalwa Kelsang Gyatso, the 7th Dalai Lama, was born, and Kelsang Gyatso had some difficulties residing in Lhasa, so he resided in Kham. And during that time, the king of Dorje and the 8th Taisitupa served him. I have it written in brocade in very big letters. From the beginning until now, the unchanged descendant of the king of Dorje and his guru served me well when I was young, and this should never be forgotten. His seal, Kelsang Gyatso's, is there. Anyway, during that time, the king of Dorje did not want the 8th Taisitu to go and reside in Karmagun. He said, "This is a precious jewel born in my country. I want to offer him half my kingdom, half of the sky and earth. I want him to settle in my kingdom." So that is how Palpung Monastery was established. All the branches of Palpung Monastery developed from there, including the Karmagun Monastery and its branches, which were originally there. Karma Kagyu and Shangpa Kagyu right now are almost one. The Shangpa Kagyu's lineage masters were Kalu Rinpoche and Bokar Rinpoche. The previous Kalu Rinpoche did 3-year retreats at Palpung Monastery in both Shangpa Kagyu as well as Marpa Kagyu. The 11th Taisitu then appointed him as the retreat master of both the Shangpa Kagyu and Marpa Kagyu retreat centers. When we lost our country and when we all became refugees, Kalu Rinpoche was at a very good age. So he was able to establish a 3-year retreat in Rewalsar, in Dalhousie, Sonada, in Darjeeling, then in Europe and America, Canada, in many places. Now there are more than 1,000 people in Europe and America, more than 1,000 Europeans and Americans who have completed a 3-year retreat. The credit for this very much goes to Kalu Rinpoche. In the West, there are Dharma establishments started by Kalu Rinpoche, Chogyam Trungpa and Akong Rinpoche. These 3 established the Dharma there and many others followed afterwards. But before that, there was very little Vajrayanabuddhism there, maybe only in universities, some curriculum. Then Madame Blavatsky from the Theosophical Society had some things about Vajrayanabuddhism. But I would not dance with her. She is great, but I think very scary. She is like Queen Victoria, if Queen Victoria ever had that energy. Anyway, that's the Shangpa Kagyu lineage. And now that is the Kagyu. Zhijed lineage Ji means pacifying. Jed is a grammatical word. It means do. The pacifier. Jivar Jepar, pacifier. Everybody knows Zhijed from Chod practice. This is based on Prajna Paramita. So what does it do? The practice of the paramitas will pacify all the defilements, the suffering of samsara. This comes from the great master Kamala Shila, who received transmission from many great masters, but especially 54 great enlightened masters, and put the practice of this all together. This lineage went to Tibet 5 times as well as to China. Kamala Shila, known in Tibet as Kadampa Sangye, is known in China as Dhammo. He is depicted with bushy hair, bushy eyebrows and big eyes. Some also call him Bodhidharma. He was a great Indian prince, a highly enlightened master, a practitioner of the Prajna Paramita practice, but everybody called him Padampa Sangye and Bodhidharma. He came to Tibet the first time through Tsari, which is in Arunachal Pradesh. He then came to Kham. The second time he came from Kashmir through northern Tibet, the Kailash area. The third time he came through Nepal and went into Tsang. The fourth time he came through Shotago to central Tibet. The fifth time was from China, where he had taught Dharma for 12 years. The Shaolin Temple and Shaolin Kung Fu tradition all are descendant of the lineage of his teaching. That is based on Prajna Paramita and Chod. In Chod practice, we make very strong Fet sounds. In Kung Fu, they say Ahu. It is very similar, just different countries and cultures which somehow transform this into all kinds of ways. But definitely there is force. And to implement force, you have to be forceful. The bigger the cannon, the louder the noise and the further the ammunition goes. So we have lots of cannons, generals and admirals and brigades here. You all know this, it has to make noise. Really shout it. Chod is business. And the lineage in Tibet is actually there are so many great masters. But the 2 main masters are Padampa Sangye and Machik Lapki Dronma, who was a Tibetan lady from the Lap area, an enlightened Tibetan master of the Chod lineage. From Padampa Sangye's last visit to Tibet, the 3rd transmission lineage, during that time he had many accomplished disciples, but there were 49 special enlightened disciples and 24 enlightened female disciples. Through these disciples, the great transmissions continue today, which are sometimes known as the 4 yogis of the 4 directions. The 25 male masters are described as whose illusions fell apart. They have no more illusions. One was called Chokro Nyunpa, crazy Chokro. Chokro was his family name and Nyunpa means crazy. He is described as crazy because if you have no more illusion, you don't care. Then other people who do care so much will call you crazy. So including him, there were 25 of them. Then Tsomo Sangye was one of the 24 enlightened female masters of the Chod lineage. Chod is practiced now by everybody. So today there is no one organization or one denomination known as the Zhijed. It's in everything we practice Chod, and so many people practice it. So the Zhijed lineage is alive, but it doesn't have its own organized religious structure. Jonangpa Jordrug lineage. Jonangpa is also known as Jordrug, 6 aspects of implementation. Jorwa means something like implementation or application, and drug means 6. The Jordrug lineage is actually the practice of Kalachakra. It is based on the Kalachakra Tantra, which was transmitted by Buddha to the king of Shambhala. Kalachakra and all its related lineages are protected in Shambhala because this world is going to be occupied by barbarians in the next 300 years. There are 2 different calculations. One has 1 0 less and one has 1 0 more. So in 30 or 300 years, this whole world will be occupied by barbarians. That means this world will have no place or anybody except them. Whoever those barbarians are, they are going to dominate this world. It is not the end of the world, but this idea, this religion, this philosophy, this way of life will be imposed on every human being on this planet Earth. So there is no room for anybody else. And these barbarians will succeed. They will manage that. If one of the predictions is right, then it will be in 30 years, or if the other one is right, it will be in 300 years. The world will be totally influenced by them. When that happens, then the 25th king of Shambhala, who will be 99 years old, will conquer the earth and bring the Kalachakra teachings to earth, and he will make this earth a heaven on earth. That unification and positiveness will remain for 500 years, and this 500 years will be the Renaissance period for humanity on earth. After 500 years, then again everything will change and go back to something like what we have now. This lineage, known as Jordrug, is sometimes known as Jonangpa, because one of the Tibetan masters who transmitted this lineage in Tibet was called Jonangpa Taranath. This lineage is now dissolved into everything. His Holiness Dalai Lama gives Kala Chakra initiation from this lineage, and we also practice the Kala Chakra from this lineage, the Jordrug. Now the Jonangpa lineage is trying to revive its identity by itself. This is under the instruction of His Holiness Dalai Lama that the Jonangpa lineage is trying to revive itself. It wouldn't take very much, because all the teachings are there and all the lineage is there. So they have to receive it and practice it and pull themselves together and pull their acts together. Then they will have an identity, Dorje Nyendrub. Now Dorje Nyendrub, which means the practice of the three Vajras, the body Vajra, speech Vajra and mind Vajra. Actually, one of the great masters, Druptop Orgyenpa, during the time of the third Karma Parangjung Dorje, about 800 or 900 years ago, the lineage which was continued by him is known as Dorjenyendrub. Orgyenpa was his name, and Nyendrub is the practice. This is very much based on the practice of yoga. It involves breathing, pranayam, physical exercises, visualization, all kinds of tantric yoga practices and exercises. This lineage is also somehow dissolved into everyone. There are four main masters in this lineage: Rinchen Pal, Shangton, Kunton Nyendova and Bota Sonam Osir. But this lineage does not stand on its own as another organized lineage. It is mixed with everyone. So these are the 8 major lineages of Tibetan Buddhism. This definitely does not complete the Tibetan Buddhist history, but I hope it is somewhat informative so that you now know a little bit more than you knew before.